Hey, good morning, team. Welcome to week 7 of organizational psychology. Anyways, this week it's going to be a light week, right? I only have the discussion board for this week. I removed the weekly quiz because I want everybody to be able to spend time on their final exam and their final paper, which is not due this week, it's due next week. Okay, so just to be clear, the dates are all there. Uh, Somehow the way the stars aligned here, our 7.5 week semester gave us that extra week to work on our paper. All right. So, anyways, this week, this is probably one of my favorite weeks because we are talking organizational culture. And I love talking about culture. And I could talk about this over and over again because culture is that unseen glue that binds us together. It's not really our personality like our MBTI that we talked about. It's not really our behaviors. It's something else that makes us who we are. And it arrives from where we come from, our upbringing, uh, and the organization that we have. So for instance, do you have a very strict organization? Like I work with the military, so I have a very strict culture. Uh, some people do not. Like if you worked at 3M, 3M has a very creative culture. They actually allow like 4 hours on Friday for creativity thought, and that's how they come up with some of their great products. Do you have a loose culture? Like for instance, if you worked at Apple or Google, where you could wear jeans and flip flops to work as a professional, or do you work, for instance, in the banking industry where you are expected to wear a suit? I wear a suit and sometimes a bow tie to work. It all depends if I'm on the podium. That's my culture. So, saying that, right? So, we're going to read chapters 15 and 16 this week. I also put a a YouTube video from Dr. Edgar Schein. And Dr. Edgar Schein is kind of he wrote a great book. He's kind of the father of organizational culture. So he says, hey, when you get to an organization, and he has dimensions that he talks about in this video, but he said, it's kind of like an iceberg, the culture. He said, we only see the tip, the very top. You go in and you're like, wow, everybody's kind of uptight here. That's what you see. Well, then you start to peel and you come to the beliefs of the organization, and that's not seeable. So what are the beliefs? So if everybody's uptight wearing a bow tie and all of this, there might be the belief that, hey, if I am under dress, I will get a bad performance review. So there's a belief going on, and then underneath that you have assumptions. So if I believe I will get a bad performance review if I am underdressed, that means I'll get fired. So as a manager, which you guys are going to be, right, or a supervisor, you have to find out what these underlying assumptions are if you want to change the organizational culture. Because you can't just say everybody can dress down. You don't have to wear a tie to work. You know what? It's not going to happen because if they believe they're going to get a bad performance evaluation and they have the assumption that they are going to get fired because of it, it's not going to happen. You can say everything you want, and it's not going to happen. The other, I put a web link, and check this out. I think you're going to love it, right? Professor Gert Hofstede, and you might have been exposed to Gert Hofstede in another course, because I know I sometimes teach uh, small business in a global environment, and we talk about Gert Hofstede there. Well, Gert Hofstede, this is a country comparison tool which is free to use on his website, and you can compare the culture of different countries. So I know we have a student here from Ghana. If you wanted to compare the culture of Ghana to the United States or wherever your parents are from, if you're from Portugal, Portugal to Singapore, you can compare whatever countries. So Gerd Hofstede has 6 dimensions of cultural orientation. And he knows there's flaws in this, right? So, for instance, he just goes by national boundaries. He said because he would love to go by subcultures like northern uh, United States versus southern United States, or East Coast versus West Coast. However, that would be too much, right? And some of the terms he used I can't relate with because of my culture. And I'm sure you'll find it kind of weird too. He's Swedish, so he goes with this, he's tainted, I guess you could say, by his Swedish culture. So, anyways, here's his 6 dimensions. He says power distance. Some cultures are really accepting of those being in power and showing great deal of respect. Some cultures or not so much. So, for instance, in the United States, right? What we see it in class, right? Some people are always professor, 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 and some people are like, hey Dave, you know, this is a cultural thing. For instance, I had a student from the Philippines one time, and he didn't talk in class, and he said in the Philippines, when he went to school, you did not ask questions to the teacher. You just sat there and took notes based what the teacher said. That is a huge power distance, right? So think about it. If you are working in a virtual team, which is kind of what this week is all about, and you're working with one of the cultures that has a big power distance, they may not ask you questions during a meeting. They may see a chain of command to route a question to you. That would be the proper authority for them. Things to think about. The other one, individualism. So, are you more of a collective culture? Like a lot of Asian societies are more collective, or do you respect the individual more? Think about that. So once again, in a virtual team, if somebody that is very collective may not voice their opinion against the norm. Somebody that is from a very individualistic society, they will. Okay? Masculinity. So, what he means here, and this is where I have a cultural difference with it, masculinity kind of means drive, ambition. Now, coming from the United States, where we have our issues on gender equality, I find an issue with the term masculinity to equate to drive. So yeah, there's something there. Uncertainty avoidance. So how agreeable will a culture be to the norm so that they want to know they're risk adverse, other words. So some cultures will not take risk. They are by the they're just not very risk adverse, and that's generally because of their history. A lot of times when we look at cultures that don't like risk, it's because of when they took risk, it ended up very bad. uh, so Well, I'll leave that as it is so we don't get in a political discussion like we did in our discussion boards this week. Okay, long term orientation. So, are is the culture driven towards, do they have a long term view or do they have a short term view? United States, we are very short term. We can barely make it to the next election to bring up politics again, right? Where other countries might have a long-term, 100 years or more orientation view. So think about that when we are, have deadlines to meet. Some cultures will look and say, well, this is due a week from now, but really we can get it done in a month. It's not going to affect anything. They have a more long-term view. Yeah. So think about that. And the last one is indulgence, right? How are they willing to spend money and indulge in life's certain pleasures, I guess you could say? So, yeah, some cultures are very indulgent. United States, Japan, right? In Japan, it's if you had business meetings, it's expected you go out and drink with the boys and have some indulgence, right, for socialization. Uh, and sometimes when you are against that norm, for instance, I'm not one of those. It's kind of weird to the culture. They don't know how to take that. It's you're being antisocial. So yeah, so those are the six dimensions, and they are real. I mean, think about it. Uh, for instance, if any of you are Hispanic, right, and we're talking about individualism and power distance. Now, think about if you went to a restaurant in Brazil or Mexico. The little things. Could you find a high chair? Probably not. You probably could not. Why? Because baby sits with mom or sits with the aunt or sits with dad while eats. That is different than American culture, right? In American culture, there's a high chair, put the baby there. We breed individualism from day one. In a lot of cultures, including Hispanic cultures, you won't find a crib. Baby sleeps with mom and dad or in the room with mom and dad. So there's not that sense of, there's a sense of collectivism and family. Uh, and in the United States, it's individualism. Nope, baby's in the crib, getting some sleep, mom and dad's in the other room. We'll put a monitor there to videotape. So there's a cultural difference. And that comes out in the workplace all the time. Uh, you just, it's these little things that we have to notice. So, anyways, there's my rant for this week. Uh, like I said, we only have the discussion board. Try to put these terms in our discussion board. I think you're going to find them fascinating. Once again, it's not an argument, it's not a debate, it's just who we are. And I'm sure you're going to see some things that's going to be enlightening. Yeah, I always found Hofstede and Shine just fascinating. Uh, so, anyways, okay. So that's all I got for this week. Like I said, next week the final paper and final exam are due. So take time this week to study up and get ready for it. And yeah, that's all I got. Okay, this is Dave, and Dave's out.